Good morning. What an honor it is to be here at Marble Collegiate Church. I have got to just start out and say, you guys have the best kids in the galaxy. Yes? Let's give them a round of applause. Yes! Any church where you can say worm poop in the chancel? Honey, that's all right with me. Thank you so much for inviting me into your worship this morning, but most importantly, thank you for inviting me into your family. I'm honored. So a few years ago, my husband Toby and I were driving through Minneapolis, Minnesota. Elise knows all about Minneapolis, Minnesota. And by the interstate was a big billboard. And at the top of the billboard, it said, Minnesota Cremation Society. Which is just weird, right? Why would they advertise? Underneath that, there was a photograph of a casket, and underneath that, it said, think outside the box. Right? That is what we are going to do today. We are going to think outside the box. This is Stewardship Sunday. This is Gratitude Sunday. And I want to talk about both of those concepts outside the box a little bit through a bigger concept that I call generosity. And so I want to start out with a little story that lays the groundwork for this in our conversation. It's about a cabin that my husband Toby, he's sitting about midway back, has up in northern Wisconsin, up near the Canadian border. He's a Scandinavian Lutheran. I am a Scots-Irish Baptist. Our marriage is a miracle. Go figure. There it is. But every summer we go to this beautiful cabin, and we have the same ritual each morning. The first day we get there, we get up really early, and we make really bad, strong coffee, and we go out in the dock, and we fish. And we catch all kind of little fish, panfish, bluegill. We fry them up, make scrambled eggs, put cheese in it because, of course, it's Wisconsin. There's got to be cheese, blueberry muffins, the whole thing. Big old breakfast, lovely start to every vacation, except for 1 year. We had the same breakfast. We took our trash, the fish guts, the eggshells, the stuff, put it in the trash can, left. Well, two things you should know. Number one, there's no air conditioning in that cabin. And number two, it was 95 degrees that day. You see where I'm going. We go out, we run the errands, we come back, we get close to the front door and are just knocked over by the fumes. So we make up little gas masks of paper towels and run into the house and get that trash and take it out and throw it on, yes, exactly what Michael was talking about, the mulch pile. Now, some people may call it a compost heap. We in Wisconsin call it a mulch pile, and you heard all about it with the children's sermon. That place where you can throw trash like eggshells and fish guts and nastiness, where it starts to break down and decompose, and that trash eventually turns into rich, dark dirt that gives life to beautiful things like daylilies and begonias and tulips. Well, that afternoon, after we got over our trash trauma, I couldn't help but think about the words of the Apostle Paul. I mean, you never know where Paul's going to come to you, you know? And there are his words, get rid of all such things, the anger, the wrath, the slander, the malice, the trash, and clothe yourself in the new self, something beautiful. You know, there's Paul writing from prison 2,000 years ago to the church in Colossae, telling them, get rid of your trash, your false gods, your false teachings. And this morning, Paul reaches out 2,000 years later and asks us here at Marble Collegiate two important questions. Number one, what trash are you carrying in your life this morning? And number two, what beautiful new thing do you want to grow in its place? I mean, let's just think about that first question for a second. What trash are you carrying? You know, we all have trash to a certain extent, but here's the thing. Sometimes we don't even know we have it because it's hidden under and around and among years of maybe denial. We're just not even thinking about it. I mean, last spring, I threw my back out. I don't know if anybody's ever done that. Anybody got back, that wants to admit it, got back problem? You know how it is. It's very painful. You lay on the floor for days, and it's fine day 1, day 2. Day 3, it's bad because you're still in pain, and you've gone through all the back issues of the New York Times and every episode of Dr. Phil, and there's nothing left to do except lay on your floor and look around. Now, I feel like we're family, so I can share this. I'm not a good housekeeper. Just there it is, big weakness right up front. And the view from my floor is scary. So I'm laying there looking around, and I'm looking, and there's under my couch, oh my goodness, all kinds of leaky pins. There are dust bunnies the size of a small terrier. And then there was this mysterious orange cube that I later realized was a wayward cheese appetizer from a cocktail party a while back. You know, sometimes we got to look under the couch. We got to look under the couch of our house and our hearts to find the trash. And when we find it, we got to let it go. We have to let it go. Why? Because if we leave it in there too long, it's going to stink up our house. You know, what is it that Emerson said, Ralph Waldo Emerson? What we worship, we become. A friend of mine put it a little differently. He's an executive trainer, and he always talked about the 3 B's, the letter B. Believe, behave, become. What we believe up here over time drives how we behave, and how we behave over time drives who we become. We've got to let it go, because that's when the magic happens. When we let go of our trash, when we hand it over to a greater power, when we hand it to God, just like that fish gut eggshell mixture that transforms into something beautiful, our trash too starts to break down. It starts to transform, and eventually we grow something new in its place. I mean, let's just think about a couple of quick examples. What if, for example, we took the trash of selfishness and threw it on the mulch pile? Now, I see a couple of you looking at me like, well, I'm not selfish. For those of you who are thinking that, I have 5 words for you. Do not lie in church, okay? No. Just don't do it. We all have a little bit of selfishness in our lives, right? And if we were willing to let go of that selfishness, fling it on the mulch pile, maybe we might grow a generosity of means. And by that I mean sharing stuff that means something to us. A couple of years ago, I was preaching in a big Baptist conference in, yes, wait for it, Las Vegas. I mean, we just should stop and think about that. Baptist in Vegas. You know, that's like putting Episcopalians in an improv troupe, right? It just doesn't work. So, you know, here I am, giving my little sermon, and then I'm standing at the pulpit, waiting on the offering in like Bali's casino, and here come the ushers with the plates, and they put them down, and among the dollar bills and the plates, honey, there are poker chips. But in Las Vegas, that means something, right? We got to give of what means something to us. And when we give of our means, something that means something to us, and we gather with others and their gifts, like we're doing today, great things can happen. I was with a good friend of mine, Dr. Otis Moss, who runs the Trinity Church in Chicago 2 weeks ago. We were together up in Toronto, and he shared this story. He talked about the number one cause of personal bankruptcy is medical debt. I did not realize that. The number one cause of personal bankruptcy is medical debt, and he said his congregation was getting hammered by medical costs as well as everyone in the community. So their church banded together and raised money, and banded with other churches in Chicago and raised money, and they raised approximately $38,000. which may not sound like that much money until you realize that you can buy debt on the open market for pennies on the dollar. So they took that $38,000 and bought $5 million worth of medical debt and forgave every bit of it. Letters went out across the country. Your debt has been forgiven. Go in peace. When we gather together and give of our means and gather with other folks who are giving with their gifts, great things can happen. But that's just one example. Let's look at another one. What if we gave over our baggage of, I don't know, stubbornness? The idea that we have to be right all the time. Oh, tell me that's not the problem with our country right now. I mean, we are so polarized. It's like the San Andreas Fault has jumped out of California and into the heart of every American. I'm right, you're wrong, end of story. It's like a greeting card I saw at LaGuardia Airport a couple of months ago. It had these two little 1950s ladies. They were smoking their cigarettes. And one says to the other, all I know is one of us is right. And the other is you. That's America down to the ground right there. What if we could take that stubbornness and throw it on the mulch pile and grow in its place perhaps a generosity of intellect, the ability, the willingness to see all aspects of an issue, the ability, the willingness to listen to all voices in a conversation, the refusal to talk over others, the refusal to dismiss those who are different. I mean, think about how that would transform not just our personal lives, but our national debate. Great things could happen. Let's just look at one more. Let's throw a third one out. What if we threw out the trash of judgment? I mean, maybe some of you are struggling with an issue with a friend or a family member or a work colleague, something that you just can't let go of. That's some heavy trash. We'd do well to remember that the person who has the most influence in our lives is the person we can't forgive. Or what if that judgment perhaps is of a stranger who is different? If we gave up that trash of judgment, maybe we might grow, a generosity of common ground, the ability, the willingness, the yearning to find common ground. And brothers and sisters, there is always common ground. Since 9/11, I've been on a comedy tour with a rabbi and a Muslim comic. Don't you love it? And the whole thing is about common ground. And at the end of the show, the rabbi, Bob, sometimes ends with this story. And remember, this is a rabbi sharing this. He says, there were two rabbis talking, and one said to the other, my son just converted to Christianity. What do I do? And the second rabbi said, really? My son too. What do we do? They said, well, let's go talk to God. So the two rabbis go to God. And they say, both of our sons just converted to Christianity. What do we do? And God says, really? My son too. There is always common ground. So let us throw that trash on the mulch pile and grow a generosity of common ground or of intellect or of means. And that's just 3 examples. Honey, there are millions of examples, and I'd love to talk about every one of them, but I know that you like to get to brunch. So let me end this morning with this image, this glimmer of what things could be like, what they might look like. Last spring, I had the privilege of walking the Civil Rights Trail in Birmingham, Alabama, which ends at the 16th Street Baptist Church. Some of you may remember that on September 15th, 1963, the Ku Klux Klan planted a bomb under the steps of that church, killing a number of people it's injuring a number of people, but killing 4 little girls. The back wall of that church today that was destroyed now is a stunning stained glass of a black crucified Christ. And one of the members came and explained the imagery. There is this black crucified Christ, the right hand outstretched with the palm bent up, pushing away, letting go of racism and violence and hatred. And the other hand outstretched with the palm up, welcoming in the beautiful things of love and compassion and justice. And as powerful as that image was, what was equally powerful is the story of that window, because when the news of that bomb hit back in '63, the news went global, and an artist in a tiny town on the coast of Wales heard about it and decided he wanted to design a stained glass to rebuild that church. And instead of asking for 1 or 2 wealthy folks to fund that window, he capped the funding at ½ crown, which was about 15 cents, so that it would be a gift of the people. And so people came from all over the country to give. School children lined up to give their lunch money. And that little country, 6 times smaller than the state of Alabama, came together, they gave, and they helped rebuild that church. Why? Because they believed in something beautiful beyond the trash of hatred and violence and racism. Because they believed that a group of dedicated people could truly change the world. So they gave, and they came together, and that wonderful historic church once again rose up, and the gospel of Jesus Christ marched forward. Brothers and sisters, that right there is our call too. It's like the great civil rights leader Howard Thurman said, God has placed a crown above each of our heads so that we will spend our lives trying to grow tall enough to wear it. God has placed a crown above each of our heads so that we will spend our lives growing tall enough to wear it. Brothers and sisters, the only way we're going to wear that crown is to get rid of the trash that blocks it. What trash are you carrying in your life this morning? Join me. Let's let it go. Put it down. Fling it on the mulch pile. Join me in creating something beautiful and wonderful and new. Join me in walking out of here being refreshed and renewed and ready for change. Join me today to change the world. And brothers and sisters, I say, we start now. Amen.
Reverend Sparks, I wanted to say it's an honor and delight to have you join us this morning at St. Stephen as part of our 2023 Summer Study Series. As you know, we've just viewed your sermon, The Mulch Pile, which you preached at Marlboro Collegiate Church there in New York. And we'd like this morning to explore some of the challenges that you pose in that sermon. But first off, I wanted to see, have you been yet this summer to northern Wisconsin, to the cabin? And if so, how was the Harley journey out that way?
Well, thank you, Charles. I really appreciate it. I just want to say to everyone, thank you so much for having me today. I'm coming to you from the sanctuary at Madison Avenue Baptist Church, and I just straight up wanted to apologize for my color choice right now. Some of you know I am a UNC grad, but in 2 hours I'm teaching a preaching course at Duke Divinity. So to be a good Christian, I thought I would put these colors on for my students. But as soon as it's done, this is going to get burned. And there it is. So I just wanted everybody to know. I'm actually headed back. I was in Wisconsin back in June, but I'm going back on Sunday to see my husband, Toby. We fly. The motorcycles stay out there. I do not want to ride in New York City. I mean, the potholes are bigger than the bike, right? So, but yeah, I'm going to go out, see the mulch pile, find something to throw on it out there, and get on the bike. I took a big 1,000-mile round trip while I was out there in June out to the Dakotas, and Charles, it's just magic. I just love that bike. So thank you for asking me, and I'm really happy and thrilled to be here.
Good. Well, thank you. Now, as you know, Reverend Sparks, our denomination, United Methodist Church, is going through a separation, a split, and certainly our society here in the United States is going through a kind of a tumultuous period, right, of division, disputes. We have rapid changes in demographics, social mores, and our summer study series, St. Stephen, we're trying to step back this summer and consider opportunities posed, right, by this period of turmoil and rapid change. And we're trying to step back and try to discern, what is God calling us to do here from St. Stephen on Sardis Road in Charlotte, and consider a question you raised in your sermon, the mulch pile. That is, how can we clothe ourselves to become a new self and a new beautiful thing together? And so my first question to you would be, do you view the current time of strife and division an opportunity, right, for the church at large or a local church like Stephen to clothe ourselves to become a new beautiful thing? And if so, why do you think that?
Yeah. What a great question. Let me just throw out a story that comes to mind. About 3 weeks ago, I flew down to Puerto Rico. I was preaching a sermon for the American Baptist Biennial down there, which was, fun, sort of, until I landed and got down there, and all of a sudden started getting a sore throat, started getting glands were swelling up, fever. I thought, oh no. So I took COVID test, all that stuff was clear, just felt horrible. So I stayed in bed, still clear the day of the sermon. So I gave the sermon, and then I got on a plane and came right back to New York. Felt bad, but kept testing negative until 2 days after I landed, and bang, positive. And here I am with, sitting in my apartment with the positive COVID test, thinking I, thought maybe that sermon would be like a legacy of love to lift people up, to heal them. And what I've left is a legacy of a virus. I've given the entire American Baptist Biennial COVID. And praise baby Jesus, I did not. It turns out most people, I don't think anybody got sick, but it did make me think, how life really does kind of boil down into either we're a virus or we're a vessel of God's love. And, every day we face choices of how we engage the world, how we engage each other. And I mean, it breaks down into one of two things. Either we infect people with our own sickness, from the strife and the stress and everything that we're facing, we infect people with that sickness, which means they're going to go out and in turn share it. Or we heal them with the very love we've received ourselves from God. And I think the discernment questions within this time of strife are pretty clear to me. It's what impact do we have on people, we as individuals and we collectively as a church? How do we make them feel? Are we a virus? Or are we a vessel of God's love? What is our legacy? It's one of those two things. And to address something you said a few minutes ago, I want to say how sorry I am for what you guys are dealing with within the Methodist Church. Trust me, you're not alone. We've gone and are going through it in the Baptist Church and many other denominations. The one thing that we have in the Baptist Church is the autonomy of the local congregation, so we can make our own independent decisions. So I will say that Madison here this year is celebrating its 30th anniversary of being welcoming and affirming, which is a pretty big deal. I believe we are the first welcoming and affirming Baptist church in the country. Not the first, we were one of the first. And so I think in the world, the choices of how do we as a church present, are we spreading a virus of kind of hate and judgment, or are we a vessel of God's love? This question is actually a tragic but perfect example. where do we come out of this strife? Where do we land? And I'll just leave you with this one example that I saw recently that I found very powerful. On PBS, there's a new documentary called Mama Bears, and you can stream it free on PBS. You can check it out. But it's this incredible story of evangelical mothers who are struggling between their faith as they perceive it and their children who are LGBTQ. And it focuses on a number of different mothers and their journeys of how they came to a place, not only intellectually, but emotionally, of realizing that their judgment was unfounded and that they had abundant love for their children and for their children who they are, absolutely raw, without judgment. And one of the things they do in this now global community called Mama Bears is step in where other parents refuse to go. So for example, if a same-sex couple is getting married and the parents will not attend, then they find a mama bear in that community and they walk those folks down the aisle. And it's this beautiful statement of love. It's being a vessel of love. And so, I know it's a tough conversation. It's a very, very difficult and fraught conversation. Blessings on the Methodist Church and on St. Stephen as you go through that conversation. I raise up, our journey that was very difficult and where we landed in this documentary, just to show that even in a place of strife, you can land in a beautiful healing place on the other side when you put the judgment on the mulch pile.
Yeah, I want to follow up on that. One of the items of trash that you mentioned in your sermon, right? Judgment, right? Which as human beings, we're all subject to, some like me more than others. But I want to ask you about this common ground, right? The common ground, I think, is an important issue for Christians. So my question is, if we take an approach like, okay, like some have said, relationship, fellowship is more important than being right. Let's say if we take that approach. My question is, what common ground do we have as Christians, or can we move toward, Reverend Sparks, do you think, the common ground, right? The common ground to build the kingdom, carry out God's will. What is that common ground for us as Christians?
Well, I think that you named it. I mean, it really is the core pieces of the teaching within the Christian tradition, which is love your neighbor as yourself. Right there, love others as Christ loved you. Core pieces that we have to agree on if you fall within the Christian denomination for the Christian faith. I also think from a more practical standpoint, when we back off the politics and some of the more difficult conversations, when you ask, you find out what kind of is what are the interests? There's a great book called Getting to Yes, and they talk about the interests that are involved. So, what do people hope for their children? What do they worry about for the future? What wakes them up at night? What brings them joy? What do they laugh at? What's their favorite food? And we've seen community gatherings in our community up here where we bring diverse, sometimes very different communities in terms of theology and politics together. And we start with those basics. We share a meal and everybody brings their food so they can talk about food. And then we go around and we talk about stories that bring us joy, which usually is about family, kids, things of that nature. And everyone laughs and you build that trust from an organic place up. And that has seemed to be a very powerful thing, that you start in stages and you start small, but you go with what everyone as a human being deals with and struggles with.
Let me ask you again, going back to your mulch pile kind of image. So, in your sermon, you very expressively discuss, fish guts and eggshells and those sorts of things. But I wanted to ask, can we extend that mulch pile to beyond that? Let's say leaves and hedge trimmings, meaning that, okay, we as a local church here at St. Stephen, we have 50 plus years of tradition of things we've done, of things we do, maybe things we do every year. certain emphases, right? But, our internal demographics have changed a bit over the years. Our neighborhood has changed a bit over the years. So my question is, can the mulch pile be used as a place for which a church can maybe prune, right? Prune its emphases in ministry or prune its programs and replace it with some new clothes, right? That may be more in tune with what God's directing us to do. And so what kind of new clothes do you think a local church could look at, right, in becoming a new and beautiful thing together?
These are great questions, Charles. Thank you. I'm going to bridge the last question and this one because I think we got to prune a lot of stuff. And my husband's all looking for an electric chainsaw right now. He's all excited about. We need a massive electric chainsaw, I think, for the church. But I think we start with ourselves. It's got to be an individual question first, and then a collective community question. I think about the frustrations that we all face in conflict, and the church, not St. Stephen, but most churches have difficult people, and we as human beings can do just crazy things, but we have to look within ourselves of what needs pruning so that we can be open to others. Marble Collegiate, where I preached the sermon that y'all just watched, has a guest preacher coming in. It's like next week or the week after. And this guy, his name is John Pavlovich, Pavlovich, I can't pronounce today, Pavlovich. And he wrote a book called If God is Love, Don't Be a Jerk, which I think is hilarious. And it's a really important point. I mean, the whole title of the book is If God is Love, Don't Be a Jerk, Finding Faith That Makes Us Better Human Beings. And every day we engage each other, we have one of two choices. Either we can bring a smile to someone or a frown. And that sounds so ridiculously simple, but it's the truth. Maybe it's not an overt smile, but maybe it's a lifting of the spirit. And sure, we have to have difficult conversations. We have to draw boundaries. Sometimes we have to say no, but you can do that with respect and kindness, and do that to be able to leave people whole. The sermon last Sunday I gave was on 1 Corinthians 16:14. And it was a very short line that just said, let all that we do be done in love. And so I think we have to start the pruning process with ourselves. But then I think we have to look at it, as you so artfully said, as the community. We have to actually look at what we're doing. And I'll tell you what I think that is going to be the death of the church for sure. And that's continuing to do what we've always done because we've always done it. And it's very easy to do that. But we can't continue what we've always done just because we've always done it. I mean, can I have an amen? I didn't hear y'all. Come on, can I have an amen?
Amen.
That's kind of fun to do when you're like recording 2 weeks ahead of time and I'm in an empty sanctuary, but whatever, I'm gonna do it. But like we're in the middle, for example, at Madison, of a brutal assessment of who we are, why we do what we do, who are we serving? And what we're finding is the needs of our community have completely changed certainly over the past 10 years, but post-COVID, completely different. And our ministries that we used to do may or may not meet those needs. And some of that analysis includes worship. Everything is up for grabs. And I know people, you don't want to mess with their worship. My family's been here for 17 generations and, this is my time. Don't mess with it. If you want this to be a church of you, then God bless. Continue down that path of no change. But if you, St. Stephen, you, Madison Avenue, you, the Church Universal, want to evolve into a vibrant, live, growing, inclusive ministry, we have got to put everything on the altar for conversation and consideration. And perhaps meaning we've got to put everything on the mulch pile. One of the big questions here is streaming versus on-site. People got used to streaming during COVID, and a lot of people don't want to get out of their jammies and come to church, which honestly, I get. And there's that argument, of course, the argument of, but the power of community in person is so healing. True. But a couple of months ago, I had a conversation with one of our members who said, Susan, I work on the weekends and I do have Sundays off. She goes, I work Friday nights and all day Saturday and Saturday night. And I have Sunday morning off, but I'm exhausted. And she said, what I do is stay home and rest. It's my literal Sabbath. And then Tuesday afternoon, when I get off work, I light a candle and I watch the service. I'm not arguing with that. I can't argue with that. And I don't want to argue with that. So I think we really have to be rawly honest about what's next and what's new and what people need. And you ask what that would look like. What would those new clothes look like? About 10 years ago, I did a sermon called Food Truck Gospel. And part of it was because I love to eat at food trucks. But I thought the idea of a food truck is perfect for what the church, or where I hoped the church was heading. And now I desperately hope it's where the church is heading. Because you think about a food truck, all they do, their whole business model is to go to the people. They go to the people. They find out what the people are hungry for so they can feed them. You know, the menu changes daily in order to meet the needs of the people. And they are masters of technology. And, you know, let's just not kid ourselves. Technology is the whole ballgame right now in order to bring the community as broad and as widely as we can. I mean, I'm addicted to a program called Chef's Table on Netflix. I don't know if anybody's watched that, but recently I watched a whole presentation on a woman named Dominique Crenn, who's the first American woman, first woman in the US to get 3 Michelin stars. And I wrote down some words she said because I wanted to share them. Because to me, this is the ultimate goal of the church. She said, this is not just my restaurant, it's my house. And if you want to come to my house, allow me to serve you a conversation. And to me, at its best, after all the pruning and all of the analysis and all the letting go and all of the rebuilding, that's the church at its best. A beautiful table, welcoming of all, that is a conversation about the love of Christ.
Well, Ms. Sparks, that is a hopeful vision as we end our conversation this morning, and appreciate, your thoughts. Again, you certainly are always welcome, right, to visit us at St. Stephen if that possibility comes. I know you occasionally come back to Charlotte on a visit. I know you've spoken at other churches in town, so we'd certainly extend to you an open invitation, because what you've shared with us and what you share through your own ministry, whether that's as a comedian or whether that's through your online sermons or in other venues, I think you certainly provide us with a wonderful vision, right, of what the church at large and our local church can become. So we have that open invitation. And again, thank you for your time, and God go with you as you certainly continue your ministry at large.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Charles, and blessings on all of you.